Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Strive for Good Life podcast. My name is Nino Vingera, and I'm here with Joseph Connell Jr., who is the founder and CEO of Lavahot, a marketing agency. Got lots of fun things to talk about, so welcome to the show, Joseph.
Yeah, hey, thank you for having me.
Yeah, no, it's a pleasure. I really enjoyed our last conversation, and just excited to talk about your evolution and what you're doing, not just with Lavahot. I mean, obviously you have a podcast and you're involved with MyCORE. So I want to get into all of that. But let's start at the beginning with business for you. How did you get into business and why did you decide to go out on your own?
Yeah, so I feel like I should give like some context, kind of like my background and then kind of how my career evolved. But, right out of high school, I did not go to college. I started working for 84 Lumber, which is I guess they're a regional, maybe a national lumber company. And through that job, I worked my way up fairly quickly through their management structure. And I had, developed great relationships with the subcontractors, the contractors that would come in there. And I think that job initially started this desire to help local to mid-sized companies. So then if you fast forward after I left 84 Lumber, I really stumbled into the marketing industry. I got hired for a local Yellow Page company. And initially, I didn't even know what it was that I was going to be doing. I didn't even understand that there was advertising involved with the Yellow Pages. And through that job, I really started to develop really the skills to be able to help businesses market. And the sales process that I was taught very on really aligned with me, which was this more or less consultative sales process where you're really trying to dive under the hood of the business, trying to understand their profit centers, their different verticals of business, how they drive their customers, their message. And I spent about 10 years working with a couple of different companies. One is a company called Thrive, which is a national marketing agency. And then I transitioned over to USA Today. And, through that career, I've worked with thousands of different businesses of all walks of life. And I think the main thing that I discovered is most business owners, they're really good at doing a thing, meaning if it's HVAC, they're really good at that. If they have a hair salon, they're good at that. But what they're not really good at is the marketing side. And they might have some generalized knowledge, but oftentimes what was happening is they were letting their marketing go to the vendors that they would work with. So if they were working with a web team, they would let them kind of guide them in how the website should look. If they were working with a TV station or radio, their marketing approach was not just fragmented, but oftentimes the message of their marketing was fragmented. So I guess through that 10 years of, working with a variety of companies, I saw this need to be able to help companies, one, optimize their marketing. So we take a deep dive and look at their marketing budget, and we try to figure out, where they're spending it, how they're spending their marketing budget, and what is the biggest driver of their marketing in terms of lead flow. The other thing that we try to do is align the messaging to make sure that it's not, a fragmented message going to all these different verticals. And then lastly, the most important part is making sure that they don't have to manage these relationships. So they don't have just this fragmented marketing approach. And we just really try to bring that all together.
Yeah. Okay. That's amazing. So when you talk about fragmented and managing relationships, are you talking about how people use a different CRM platform that doesn't integrate with, their email marketing or what do you mean by that, to give people a better idea?
Yeah. So, and that's a great point. I mean, on the digital front, there was definitely some of that. They might have their CRM over here. They might have their social media. Obviously, within those platforms, email marketing might be powered by MailChimp or some other technology. So there was some of that, and we figured out a solution to be able to fix that part. But oftentimes, the fragmentation came from really just allowing different marketing vendors to come in and just tweak their message just enough to where it's not consistent across the board. So the best example I always give to this is, if you look at a company like Domino's, when they roll out a campaign, it's consistent, whether it's on radio, TV, billboard, social media, they just roll out a very consistent campaign. And local to mid-sized companies, because of, we'll just say the barrier of entry of having somebody come in and manage your marketing. Most local to mid-sized companies, they can't take on the expense of hiring a marketing director to come in and manage all of their marketing and, compete at the same time with these national and regional sized companies that have big marketing teams, and they have all the tools to be able to work around that. So oftentimes that's what happens, is they rely on the expertise of the vendor themselves, meaning if it's TV, the TV representative will come in with a certain program and package, and then they'll make recommendations. And unfortunately, in the world of media buying, typically the approach of like the recommendation is fueled by what is in the best interest of the media company, rather than what's in the best interest of the actual client. Because if they dig deep enough, and this is what I saw, is oftentimes that not only was the message fragmented, but there would be multiple vendors running different Facebook ads for companies. And none of the ads were consistent. And it was almost like what fueled that was the packaging of how they sold the media to them to begin with. It was almost like it's a throw in, but they're paying for it one way or another. And when you dive deep enough into the contracts of these marketing campaigns, we would see, a large chunk of money going to things like digital display, multiple Facebook ad campaigns, and multiple like local listing claiming. Like it was just like a bunch of different pieces that they already had. And there was like all this overlap. And it was just because of the way it was packaged and bundled in, your typical business owner doesn't know how to, one, drill down far enough to say like, hey, I need this, I don't need this, what can we do within, this program to specifically fill this need? The other side of that is oftentimes the contracts were anywhere from a year to 2 years. And it's not that I'm like anti-contracts, I'm just anti being locked into that specific thing, because in 2023, I think it's important that a business owner could be nimble in their marketing approach. If a new platform rolls out, there's new features or a new style of ad that gets launched by Google or Facebook or what have you, you should have that ability to really pivot that budget to meet the demand of the market and to drive as many leads as humanly possible. What I often try to look at beyond, where is the marketing going? How much are we spending? And this is really, for me, it's one of the biggest pieces, is I try to put transparency into the marketing, meaning I want to have tracked programs to know how many leads are coming in from Google AdWords and how much is coming in from their Facebook ads. If we're doing Google local service ads or Google Screen, I want to be able to track that, because then we can make real decisions on where we're placing the money within the marketing. And in my experience of working with thousands of different local to mid-sized companies, oftentimes they don't even know to ask for some of these things. And to be fair, I mean, they really shouldn't know to ask for these things because they're busy running a business. So, what we try to do is help them structure their marketing agreement that allows them to be nimble, consistent messaging, and transparency to be able to track what is the most effective use of their money.
That makes a lot of sense. I mean, obviously, you need good data to make good decisions. I like that you brought up, getting locked into contracts, because technology is shifting rapidly. And so if your ad spend is locked up in a year contract, right, you can't adopt the new AI tech that's coming out if you don't have the money to spend for it. So I think that's incredibly important and valuable what you guys do. In terms of kind of getting into a little bit some of the more nitty gritty things, like you mentioned messaging. Like, how do you start unifying messaging? Does that come from having a clear mission statement and just good branding, or how do you get into that?
Yeah. So oftentimes I'll look at, I always start with what I call the profit centers. And really every business has a profit center. So, and I'll use HVAC as a good example because they have very clear and defined profit centers. So it might be their install crew, meaning the crew that goes out there and does new installs when somebody needs a new heat and HVAC system. Then there's the service and repair side of the business. And then, they might have like a whole maintenance division, but I try to look at those profit centers to try to figure out, okay, well, if your phone rang every single day off the hook and it was one type of customer, who would that be? And more often than not with HVAC, it's going to be new installs because, it's the high ticket item, typically $7,000, $9,000, $10,000 install. Below that is typically the service because that's what's going to drive, down the road, more installs, and it's very quick cash flow. And then the maintenance side kind of goes hand in hand with the service. So I try to look at those profit centers to figure out, okay, well, inside of that, if that's what you really want, what is your capability and capacity? Meaning, how many are you doing now? And how many are you capable of doing if we did not hire another person, did not put another truck on the road? Like right now, what would that look like? And I try to figure out because the worst thing you could do to a business, if you don't understand that, is drive more leads than they can feasibly handle, which again is where the nimble thing comes in. Because if we turn on a lead flow and they get too busy or they're getting too many leads, now they're just throwing leads out the window. So I try to look at that initially, like what do they really want to be known in the marketplace for? The next thing that I try to look at is why are they different? What's their unique sales proposition? There's 5 or 6 other HVAC companies right in the same area. They've been around seemingly just as long as you. What makes you different? So I try to identify that. And oftentimes, we'll try to carve out the message based on a combination of things, maybe the years of service, if they do same day service. So it really depends on each business. But if you dig deep enough, you'll really start to get to what their unique sales proposition is. So oftentimes we'll try to center it around that. If they want to be known as the company that gets out there the fastest for a new install, we try to cultivate that message so that we can try to drive that they're the fastest people to come out for new installs. It also depends on their customer as well, which even goes down to the media. If I meet with a company, even now in 2023, and there's some people that will listen to this and be like, this dude's out of his mind. I live in Ocean City, Maryland, which is a retirement community. And the people that have the most disposable income are typically an older demographic. So there are some cases where we'll still use traditional print media. We'll still do direct mail. We'll still do some newspaper. We'll still do even some yellow pages. If negotiated and packaged right, some of this stuff actually becomes free within the media buys. So, and that's where the tracking comes in. You put a tracking number on it and you're able to see how many leads actually came from this media source. So with the messaging itself, it really does get crafted out based on who it is they're trying to target, what type of product they're trying to sell, and then why, what their unique sales proposition is.
Yeah, I love that. It's funny that you bring up the mail because just the other day I got mine from the mailbox and I remember thinking to myself, why does this still exist? Why am I still getting out? But it wouldn't if it didn't work. And so I think it's valuable to bring up that point that if it's working, why not, right?
To that, the one thing that I try to tell business owners is don't be so emotional about the media source. Oftentimes, local to mid-sized companies will make buying decisions based on a feeling of what they feel is the thing that works. No real statistics on it, no real tracking, no real evidence to whether or not it's working. I have a great example of that. A company I worked with, was in the glass industry. And I remember the owner, I was sitting down with him and we were discussing renewing certain ads for the yellow pages of all places. And he was like, yeah, I want to pull that away because I don't feel it works. And I was like, hey, I completely understand. What makes you feel that it's not working? And he said, I just don't think people are using it. So none of it's statistic based or analytic based. It's all like feeling, right?
Right.
And then I said, well, the good news is we track this. Why don't we take a look at the tracking and we can figure out like how many people actually went to the yellow pages, opened it up, and called the number inside the book. And when we looked at it, it was 1,400 people for the year. And the average cost per lead was about $5 a lead. And it's like, well, I mean, at least 1,400 people are going there. So, I mean, it might be worth keeping, you know, at the time, I think the ad was like $100 a month.
Yeah.
So it was like the cost was crazy stupid. The amount of leads that were coming in more than justified the cost, provided we can convert 1,400 leads that come in. So when you look at the numbers, that's where it's like, okay, it's no longer about what I feel, because here's the real data, and it shows how many people called. And then in that tracking source, we're actually able to listen to the phone calls to be able to figure out, okay, what were they calling for? Was it auto glass? Was it shower glass? So that's why I say, don't be emotional about the media source. I think that's something that that happens often. I'll periodically see a business owner who will go online and say, hey, who uses this anymore? As if though that's like a barometer for whether or not it works. And it's just not. Like, you know, who still uses Facebook ads? And the people that just don't like Facebook ads will be like, oh, I never buy from ads. It's like, that's not how you should measure the success of a campaign based on the loaded opinions of people on social media. Right. It should be driven by data. It should be just tracked very simply. This ad ran, this is how many leads, this is how many customers. Like, that's the only way to truly do it. The second worst way to track it would be, well, my staff asks how they found us every call. Like, every call that comes in, we ask them where they called us from, which is highly inconsistent, because half the time they'll never ask the question, if 25%. And of that 25%, they may say the source that they used to make the phone call, but won't track it back to the source that originally prompted them to actually pick up the phone, which it might be they saw a TV ad, they saw a Facebook ad, but they eventually went to Google and made the phone ring. So yeah, really, it comes down to tracking. And for the record, I think that all three of those should have maybe gotten some level of credit, like Facebook. But then if they went to Google, you know, they captured the lead, so there should always be a part of that. But
yeah, absolutely. I think it just speaks to the point that you need good data, again, to make good business decisions. And it is shocking how many people don't have the data, aren't tracking their marketing. It's funny that you say, yeah, that people go off a feeling, because I've had plenty of people tell me that email marketing doesn't work. And I'm pretty sure it's the highest converting marketing method there is. So
for sure,
blows my mind.
For sure. And again, it's because that's a feeling. It's a feeling that maybe they don't like being marketed to through email. But I'm willing to bet, like, if you dig deep enough, they have probably made a purchase from their preferred maybe vendor or preferred clothing line, whatever it is, like a special that came to them. But you're absolutely right. I mean, email is just one of those very effective ways to be able to, you know, stay in front of a customer, a potential customer, and then hopefully and eventually enough touch points convert them into a customer that stays around and keeps coming back.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's another part that people don't realize, right? It's not necessarily about getting the sale right away. It's about the touch points that nurture that lead and help it actually become a sale eventually down the road, right? And so you got to think about the long game. It's not just about, you know, kind of a hit and quit mentality. Let's talk about, okay, so we get the messaging in place, you know, dialed in on what the offer is and the value proposition. You know, what kind of systems do you install next? Because there are so many different ways to market. I mean, do you start with running ads? Do you run email campaigns? Like, where do you go once the messaging is established?
Yeah. So internally, we have a marketing software called Slingshot. So that's one of the first things that we do is set them up in there, because it has call tracking systems. It has, you know, text capability. It has email capability. We claim their listings to make sure that their, listings are claimed effectively. We link in their Google My Business and Facebook. We set up processes for them to be able to do reviews. One part of that is just being able to set it up so that you can send a review request. And then we set up these, we call them slingshot tap cards. We just, set it up so that your field technician, when they're out in the field, and we even provide a script for those technicians. It's very simple. Mrs. Jones, on a scale of 1 to 5, how would you rate your service today? And then the goal of that is, if they say a 5, great. Would you mind leaving us a review if it took less than 30 seconds? And if they say yes, great. You tap it, give them a quick option to be able to pick Google or Facebook, and either way, we capture a review. If they say a 4 or lower, we encourage that you say, great, what could we do to get it to a 5? Try to figure out, what you could fix, what the problem is that got you to a 4. So we try to set up, I say it's, creating a solid foundation for your digital presence. Sometimes it might even be, they've had a website for the last 5 years and it's okay, but they're not in love with it. So we'll typically, more often than not, we end up either completely rebuilding their website, especially if it's like completely outdated, or we'll work with the web team that initially built the site and see if they can make some adjustments just to maybe add chat, modify the message a little bit, maybe minor tweaks just to maybe the aesthetics. And then we'll also run an SEO audit just to see like how well it's performing. And we'll try to get, an idea of how well they're coming up within their core market. We didn't really hit on that, but that's one thing that I also like to look at as well. In addition to like, what is the ideal customer? Your typical local to mid-sized company, and it does vary, normally has like this one set geography that like if they could dominate that one market, they wouldn't need to go past that market. And I see this happen all the time where a business might really be able to like 2x, 3x, 4x their revenue just within their current marketplace, but they're trying to spread their marketing budget well beyond where it is that they really want to dominate. And, if they were to really just like focus that message, turn up their budget in that local market rather than spreading, let's say it's something like Google ads or Google local service ads, rather than spreading it across 2-3 counties, if you could just hone it in and dominate locally, it's like, why not, like, let's get every piece of the pie we can right here at home, where we get to, beyond, before the point of diminishing returns. Because what happens in this like large scale, like multi-location marketing strategy is oftentimes you're going well beyond where you would like to be going. Let's say it's a 45-minute to an hour long drive to do one service call. And then when you did that service call, you've now set yourself up to where in the future, if that customer needs you, you got to go all the way back out there, which sometimes isn't the worst thing, but it's like, why not, if we right now, capability and capacity, we could manage to handle, 7-8 installs a week. Why not try to get those 7 or 8 installs right here at home rather than dragging ourselves to other markets? So
yeah, I love that point. It makes a lot of sense, right? To just focus and really dial it in instead of spreading those marketing dollars thin elsewhere, where you might get clients here or there, but yeah, you're going to be driving back and forth all day long. Very good point. Let's talk about, so we've talked about positioning, messaging. We've talked about, the system that you installed, the Slingshot software. I think that's awesome. Just to get all of those pieces in one place. It's pretty cool that you guys can do that. Where do you guys, from there, in terms of advertising, because a lot of people, obviously it's important to track the data, to track where the leads are coming from, like we've already talked about. But obviously there's so many different platforms. You recommend Google and Facebook as kind of the big ones. Have you seen success elsewhere? What about that?
Yeah. So A lot of the businesses I tend to work with, and I don't know if this is just because of the vibe I put out or if it's just how my career is just cultivated. Home service companies tend to just like gravitate to me, which is great. I'll always take on more home service companies. It's just maybe it's the content I put out or, maybe reputation. A lot of it kind of gets referred to me. So if I'll give it to you from that perspective. So oftentimes Google is going to be the first thing that I look at. How well do we come up on a search result when searching on this device? Because when somebody has an immediate need, if they have termites, if they need a new HVAC system because it's not working, if their hot water heater goes up, they're not going to turn on the TV and flip through until they see an ad. They're not going to go grab the newspaper. All that stuff is good for like that initial branding and to put out there maybe a new message. Like if you're in the pipeline of figuring out the right company to go to for a new HVAC system, like if it's on its last leg. But like when stuff happens in that like emergency realm, they're going to just pick up their phone and they're going to search. So the biggest thing that I've seen, especially this year where we've been slowly pivoting and navigating in certain verticals, and in our market, Google local service ads have not always been opened up for every category. And I think this is the general gist across the country, is that when it first started, it was for your top categories. It was for like plumbing, HVAC. It wasn't really laid out there initially for your tree service companies, your pest control companies. So like they've evolved that program really good, like even down to power washing companies. They've evolved that program very well in a combination of home services and professional services like lawyers and dentists and so on and so forth. So what I've really been looking at, especially in 2023, is I've been looking at what are our conversions on Google AdWords and what would it look like if we incorporated Google local service ads? So, anybody that's listening, if you're in the home service space, I would say do a search in your market for your market, for your industry. And if you see an ad that has a green little check next to it, it means that it's Google guaranteed. So those ads, what I love about them as opposed to your traditional Google AdWords is that it's pay per lead. It's not pay per click, meaning if you're not getting an actual lead, meaning they're calling or chatting or booking, you don't pay for it. They could click on it all day long. They could read the information about your company. They could go even further to go to your website, maybe in another search. But if they do not pick up the phone and call and ask you specifically to come out there to help service them or give them an estimate, you do not get charged, which I love. So you get the better positioning. So you're imprinting on that customer the moment they do the search. And if you are running Google ads at the same time, it's almost like you're going to double dip because they'll see your ad here, then they might see you in Google ads. And, God willing, especially when you have this like local marketing approach, you're showing up in the map section as well. So that's 3 times that customer has seen your business. And ideally, they'll hit you on the map section. But in what we've been tracking by introducing Google LSA, and I'm not saying add Google LSA, I'm saying look at your current Google ad budget and maybe shift it down slightly and add Google LSA that way. And then track the 2 over that next month. Like look at how many leads you get from Google ads, then look at how many you get from Google LSA and see what the performance is. And what we have been seeing is with certain Google ad campaigns that we, for lack of a better word, I would say maybe inherited or maybe a business was already locked into a contract. The highest case scenario I saw was a business that was getting their average lead for one campaign was $180 a lead with Google ads. And we introduced in the same market, Google LSA, and that lead cost went down to $40.
Wow.
So and if you think of that from like a budgeting standpoint, let's say your budget was $1,800 a month and your lead cost is $180. You're getting 10 leads a month. And if you look over in this bucket, if that same $1,800 was over here at $40 a lead, oh man, I just backed myself into a corner mathematically, but what, 4.5 leads? So 4.5 leads for the price of one.
Yeah.
It's just, it's a no brainer. And the way that we've been doing it, because we haven't wanted to like just straight up cut out a lead source, because Google ads does still drive leads. So we didn't want to fully cut it out. But what we tried to do is like, almost like weigh the difference and then incrementally make those adjustments. And in some cases, what we've seen is a 40 to 60% increase in lead flow for the same exact budget.
Wow.
Which is a huge difference, especially as like it's like any lead source. Like that was when we initially started that campaign, but you add in more reviews, which increases the amount of times your ad appears. You add in that you have a great response rate on Google local service ads, which is important for Google. They want to see that you respond back to the customer. Add in maybe an increase in budget, add in more pictures. Like there's these things that you can do to fine tune those ads to just make them perform better and better. So, for me, on the home service standpoint, to go back to it, like that's what I've really been looking at is like, how do we help businesses pivot, some of this large spend Google AdWord money into Google local service ads? And there's plenty of businesses out there that are doing Google local service ads, but oftentimes what I see is they just set the budget and they just let it run. They don't know that there's these little things that they can do to really maximize the efforts of that campaign. Simple things like just focus on reviews. The more reviews you get, the better. The more photos you place in there and do it consistently, putting more photos into that campaign, better. Having a great response rate when somebody comes in as a lead, way better. Because Google, like, think of it from Google's perspective. Their job or their mission and their company is dedicated to helping connect information to people. When people do a search, they want to connect them to that information. And for Google, they want to connect people to more or less like the authority of that information, the best qualified for that information. So if they're connecting a searcher for HVAC and they connect them via a Google LSA ad, and this company over here never even like makes it an effort to disposition that ad, like tell Google like, hey, we booked an appointment. They're going in and communicating and like really giving information back to Google. Google's going to eventually be like, okay, it doesn't seem like they care to even interact with this customer. Even if you are, it's just they want to see it. So I would say, go and disposition it. Like, let them know that you booked an appointment. Let them know that you closed it. Let them know that you did a bid or an estimate. Let them know that, the interaction, because that's what they're looking for. And I can guarantee you, the more you tell Google what's happening with the customers they're driving to you, the more they're going to reward you with maybe consistent placement.
I love that. Man, I feel like we're doing a masterclass here. You've got so many nuggets of wisdom that I think are really valuable for our audience. So this is fun. Okay, so talk about advertising. Let's talk about converting the leads and the role that a website plays, because a lot of people don't understand the difference between a website and a funnel. So what are the elements that you need on your site to really make it a funnel and not just a website?
Yeah. So I definitely think, you should have like right at the top of your website, you should really speak to, what it is you do and how good you do it with a call to action tied to it. So if you want to be known in the marketplace for like being, let's say HVAC, the company that has the best response rate, the best speed, meaning something breaks, you're out there within an hour, then you should try to spell that out like right away. Especially if that's the type of customer you're looking for. If it's installation, it should maybe speak to that. It should speak to, the type of warranties you offer, whatever your USP is. But, oftentimes there's just these little tiny things like maybe having a great lead form on the homepage of the site. Nowadays, incorporating chat which is extremely easy. Web chat is something, and there's so many different companies. You don't have to use mine, but there's so many companies out there that you can go to for web chat, and it's fairly inexpensive. For us, it's $100 a month to incorporate chat, which engages that customer 24/7. So it's just these little subtle things to get them to convert. And just from that, like chat can increase your conversions by 20 to 30% just on its own, just because if somebody's doing that search at 6 p.m. and you close at 5, maybe they call and leave a voicemail, but we're in an age where people, they want to be able to order DoorDash and go on Amazon. They want to do everything from here, and there's a huge demographic. Like, I even think that it's worth in some categories, even in home service, where you should give them an option to be able to just buy. Like and not that every customer you have is going to go to your website and buy, maybe it's a service call, or maybe it's, a hot water heater install, or a pest service, a first-time service. Not everybody's going to do that, but the ones that will do it can't do it if you don't allow it. So, really start to explore that, because, we really are in that age of marketing where people, they're just getting so used to just hitting the button, maybe going to Apple Pay and checking out and just being done with it. I would even say that for like your local to mid-sized restaurants, like really try to dial in a way to be able to do that, because companies like Domino's and Chipotle, like they're just always going to eat your lunch as long as they're the only ones that are leveraging these tools. And the other beauty side about where we are digitally now is that there's so many sources to be able to add these things to your media mix, and it's not as expensive as you think. And oftentimes, if you're pairing with the right software company, they're not just going to get you signed up for a subscription where you have to like just go it alone. There's a lot of great companies out there that if you find the right ones, and, feel free to reach out, I'll point you in the right direction. But there's a lot of good software companies where they can tie this technology into your business, like tracking and chat and click to pay. And you don't have to go it alone. Like they'll walk you through the roadmap of how to implement it. And in some cases, they'll help you place it. They'll help you execute it. And you're just funneling customers there. You're just telling them like, hey, if you want to purchase this, go to my website.
Yeah, so. I love it. I love that, you talk about innovation and keeping up with those trends, because you're right. I mean, we're in a day and age where people don't want to have conversations face to face anymore, let alone on the phone. And it is just this, everyone wants it now, right? Everyone's adopted that Amazon mindset where they can just hit buy and it'll show up on their doorstep the next day. Sometimes the same day. So that whole conversation is really fascinating. And it is tough, I can imagine, for businesses that rely on getting on the phone to be able to give quotes or whatever. So I love that even in those types of businesses, there are opportunities, if you really think about it, to innovate and make that an easier experience for your customers. I love that. I'm curious about content. We haven't talked about that at all. Like, where does that play a role? Is that even important? Because we've talked about a lot of different things to generate leads without even mentioning, creating videos and doing the social media grind. So how does that play a role in this?
Yeah, so content, especially for your local to mid-sized guys, is it's an acquired taste. Meaning, I am a huge fan of it. And there's certain industries where I really think that inside of your local market, and I'll use me as an example. So like my entire agency was able to cultivate and launch from starting a podcast. So starting the podcast, I don't know if in some cases, I don't even know if it was from a direct listener or if it was somebody that listened. It just expanded the reach of what my agency could do and what our capabilities could be. So, and I know I'm not the solid case for that, because I can work with companies all over the country. That's the beauty of marketing and digital marketing. And I know an HVAC company cannot help a company in California. But there are simple things that you can do on a localized level that can really set you apart from your other local competitors. Meaning, and maybe it's podcasting, or maybe it's just doing like consistent videos talking about tips about your, maybe your service, or like how to, identify termites, or how to identify a leak from your plumbing. All of these things can compound. And there is, to a degree, doing video content, even on a local level, there's ways of being able to SEO that content in YouTube, for instance, where it could potentially come up in the search result, and you can backlink your website to it. So there is some of that. I think for other professional services, like let's say you're a realtor in a certain market, I think you should consider doing a podcast where you're interviewing the local restaurant owners, the local nightclub owners, the local kid venues, maybe even the local school principals. Because doing that type of content where you're interviewing these people, one, it gets you connected to their network. So if you think of, the guy that owns the best pizza shop in town, and you just interview him like, hey, I wanted to interview you to hear about like how you've been in business for the last 30 years, like what has really set you apart, blah, blah, blah. That business owner knows people that you do not know. And when they share that episode on their Facebook business profile and their personal pages, it's going to reach people that you did not know, and they now know who you are as a realtor because you interviewed this individual. The other thing, because you can take that content and you can SEO it on YouTube, is if somebody starts searching into that marketplace, realtors in Houston, Texas, or pick market, if they are just going to YouTube to try to find like information about it, maybe the school district, like you're going to start stacking this content that makes you become the authority within that market. And yeah, you might find an audience that goes beyond that. And TikTok is a great example where there was a ton of realtors that would put out this content, and it would go well beyond where they are locally, and it would attract people that were coming to the market. So, I think there's a lot of that happens. I think, we've seen companies be successful in all verticals of business throughout the last 3 years on TikTok, whether it's a local lawyer, it's a pest control company, HVAC, realtor. It's just, one, do you have the stomach to do it? And two, can you do it consistently? Because that's really the two things to look at. Like you've got to look at it over a long enough time horizon. And me personally, like when I set out to create this show that I launched with Lavahot, I was in it for 5 years. I was just like, I'm gonna do it for 5 years. If nothing happens inside of 5 years, then maybe I'll call it quits. And more than likely I won't, just because now I just enjoy it. I enjoy when I get to have great people onto my show. So, and the other big thing is measure the right thing, because I think when it comes to content, and this was something that I learned from Grant Cardone and his team, they were like, when you do an episode or when you do a video, don't even look at it. Like, don't measure the metrics of it. Look at it 5 years, like look at it as a 5-year plan. The thing you measure is revenue. And for me, it was very easy. Like when I started my agency, because it was the only marketing vehicle that I had, I was not, paying for Facebook ads, and I still don't. Like literally everything that comes to my agency is usually just attracted through the podcast, or maybe through, reposting it in short form. So I always look at that, like what revenue has been generated from my podcast, not did I get, Joe Rogan levels of downloads this month? Am I Alex Hormozy now? Like none of that matters. What matters is, one, am I enjoying the process? Am I able to bring on great and valuable people to the show? And does it drive revenue? But if I had to like really nail it down to like, is it worth the time and money and investment to build a studio and record and take that usually like one episode, from pre-production to production to post-production, you got about 3-4 hours invested into it. So it's a time investment to like get everything set up, get ready to roll. And thank God, my wife has just like really taken on a lot of like, I call her the executive producer because she coordinates every episode. She, helps put everything together, will set up everything for me. So it's a big time save for me. But she even publishes it. Like most episodes I never look at, which is insider tip. Like if you just don't like, you want to do a podcast or you do want to put out video content, but you're like every other human being where you're like, oh, I don't want to publish it. Like, I don't want to, just don't even look at it. Like, just record it, have somebody else do it. Just find maybe a workout partner. Maybe it's another person who also wants to do video content. And you're like, hey, we're going to trade off. You're going to take my stuff. I'm going to take your stuff. We're going to publish each other's stuff. And that's it. I'm just not even going to look at it. And really for me, that's how I got started. Cause I was like every other person, I hate the sound of my own voice. I hate, looking at me on camera. Did it anyway. The little secret was I just did it and I just had other people just like take care of like posting it for me. So
I love that. I love that. It gives me a lot of good stuff to think about. So I appreciate you sharing that. It's been great for me so far and I'm just getting started. So it gives me a lot of hope for the future as well to see how well you've done with the podcast. And it's just fun to think about. Let's briefly, because I know we're starting to push up on time. I'm curious about where you see the future of marketing going. I know AI is, a hot topic right now. Mm-hmm. Is it AI? Are there other things that you're kind of looking ahead to? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. I have not fully gone down like the AI rabbit hole with exception to one thing. Inside of our platform, we simplify the review process by making it so that AI will simply reply back to the review. It will read who wrote the review, what the review was about, and it can read that. And it's just a beautiful process. It would just read it, who it was from, and really write a nice response, which is usually a great response to begin with. But it's way better than the non-responses of the last, 40 reviews that a business owner got, which is a very slept on area in terms of like a Google business profile and enhancing your brand's equity in the marketplace. Is just something as simple as replying back to reviews has both a Google impact, meaning like, because you're giving Google more information, believe it or not. Replying to a review gives Google more information to know about your business. But equally, it gives your customer a sense of like appreciation for the fact that they took time out of their day to write a review. And it also gives your next customer a sense of appreciation because they can see that it matters to you. It matters the feedback of your customer. So, and that person, and neither does the person who's going to read the review. None of them know if it was replied to by AI. And, on the surface, we have a simple way, like if you want to be able to manually go in there and respond, we have that tied in and integrated to the software. But I say, if you're going to experiment with how AI can help your business, that's probably one of the first places I would go, is letting AI do the one thing you're not doing now anyway, which is replying back to reviews. Other than that, I no doubt it's definitely going to become more and more of a thing as we go. I mean, we use AI constantly in like, even just within our podcast. Like I don't like, if I get a guest that comes in, I'll drop their bio into ChatGPT and say, give me some ideas of questions I could ask this individual. And it'll really shape out, especially if it's an area of business that like I'm not, overly knowledged in. I'll have it like, give me like a structure of like questions that I can ask. And it's not like it's the end all be all, but it like really gives like some insight on what to do. And if you talk about on the content standpoint, like if you're an individual that is like, hey, I do want to start making content, but I just don't know where to start. There's a lot of great sources, one of which would be ChatGPT. Just like give it a topic. Let's say it's, give me great video ideas to discuss a termite inspection or, how to identify termites. Like it'll spit out enough to get you started. And it might not be like the full video. And really you could ask it to give you like a script of like, hey, how would I hook the customer? How would I, what would the core of the content and how would I, call to action them, like just within ChatGPT. So definitely on like a content basis, we can tell that. The other thing is try not to make it too obvious. I think we're about to see a slew of authors hit the market, right? That, have, just rather than ghost writing their ChatGPT writing their entire books, right? So, I mean, there's definitely that side. So try to, fine tune anything that you're having ChatGPT create for you to make it more personal. But yeah, I definitely think it's not going anywhere and it's only going to get better and better for sure.
Yeah. It's pretty amazing what it can already do. So if you just kind of extrapolate that out a few years, I can't even imagine, right, where it's going to take us. So, and that's actually why, I'm such a proponent of entrepreneurship, because it's replacing jobs left and right already. I can't even imagine what the future is going to look like. And, the biggest job security you can have is to be your own boss. And so, I love the conversation we've already had. This has been so much fun. Where can people go to connect with you?
Yeah, so I have a couple of different spots. One, on pretty much every social media platform, I'm at Joseph Connell Jr. Or for the podcast, if you want to check out any of our episodes, it's lavahotpodcast.com. Right on there, we have, every way that you can listen to it via audio. If you want to watch any of the YouTube videos, if you want to try to find like a specific guest that we've had, you can do a search. But we fairly consistently upload the videos to YouTube. We're working on publishing more and more. In terms of like, if you're curious what a marketing optimization would look like, meaning you want to have us take a look at your marketing, I would say just go to golavahot.com. And then for all things else business-wise, I'm actually the CRO for a company called MyCORE. So we help with, one is marketing, but we also help with payroll, employee benefits, HR, bookkeeping. So a myriad of different things that we actually have great resources for businesses as an advisory firm. So that's mycore.io. So, really any of those places. And then I had an offer for every one of your listeners. So these Slingshot tap cards, I actually have 25 of these that I'll give away for free. So if you're interested in being able to like just set up one of these cards, link it right to your Google My Business, your Facebook business profile, to increase reviews, you just go to slingshotmybusiness.com and just fill out the form. We'll get you linked up and we'll get you all set up with one of these cards.
That's very generous of you. Thank you so much. And I feel bad. Yeah, we didn't get to talk about MyCORE, which maybe we'll do on another episode, because I think.
No, well, I think I linked you up with our CEO. So I promise you, because we're new in our like partnership. Like this has been a recent thing. I can promise you, he will definitely give a way better breakdown of the MyCORE company than I would be able to. But yeah, in a very passionate way. Like he's definitely going to be a great guest if you have lined that up.
Yeah. So I've already spoken to him. We're going to try and get him on the show, but yeah. All the stuff you've mentioned, we're going to link in the show notes. So if you're listening, just go there to connect with Joseph. What's your final message to our audience?
Yeah. And I'm actually going to take this from the MyCORE, message. And there's 3 core principles that we operate by. which is walk by faith, lead with who, and measure what matters. A lot of what I talked about today was measure what matters. Like, try to see if it's on the marketing standpoint, try to put some sort of measurement into your marketing, whether it's, the calls, the forums, maybe it's chat, like try to figure out like what is actually driving the most leads, and then make the most educated decision you can. Don't operate just from like a gut or a feeling. Don't get emotional about the marketing source. Measure what matters, I think, is one of my favorite of the core foundations of MyCORE. And I think it's just because it's been such a big part of my career, has been really measuring it and looking at it. Like, look at the data to be able to figure out like what the best decision is.
I love that. That is invaluable advice. Thank you so much for being on this show. This has been amazing. For anyone listening out there, make sure you go and connect with Joseph, and obviously subscribe to our channel, whatever your platform you're listening to this on, and share this content. That helps us out a lot. But thank you so much again, Joseph. And for everyone listening out there, we'll see you guys in the next one.
Yes, sir. Thank you.